All right, so we're going to do a deep dive today on John Carpenter's Halloween.
Okay.
I know what you might be thinking. Another deep dive on a classic horror film.
Right.
But trust me, this isn't just a trip down memory lane.
Uh-huh.
We're going to go beyond the surface here to uncover the elements that make this film so incredibly effective.
Yeah.
And why almost 50 years later, it still has the power to truly unsettle us.
Yeah, you know what's so fascinating to me about Halloween is just how much it achieves with so little.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a masterclass in minimalist filmmaking.
Yeah.
You've got a very simple premise, a shoestring budget,
Yeah.
only $300,000, and yet it gave birth to one of the most enduring horror icons of all time.
Okay, so let's rewind to 1978.
Okay.
Carpenter and his co-writer Debra Hill initially called this film The Babysitter Murders.
Oh, wow.
A title that definitely cuts to the chase, right?
It does.
But it was that focus on a seemingly innocent, relatable setting that became one of the film's strengths. Suburbia, a place we associate with safety and normalcy, becomes the hunting ground for pure evil.
Exactly. It plays on our anxieties about the fragility of the world we think we know.
Right.
The safe haven of home is invaded.
Right.
And that's a fear that resonates deeply with audiences no matter what the decade is.
And speaking of things that go bump in the night, we can't talk about Halloween without talking about Michael Myers,
Right.
also known as The Shape.
Yeah.
That blank, emotionless mask is instantly recognizable and incredibly chilling.
Yeah.
And, I was reading that it was actually a repurposed Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, resourceful.
Isn't that amazing?
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but beyond the trivia, the mask itself is a stroke of genius.
Oh, absolutely.
By stripping away any human expression, Carpenter created a void,
Right.
a blank slate onto which we project our own fears.
Exactly.
We don't know what motivates Michael Myers. He simply is
Right.
pure evil.
It's like staring into the abyss.
Right.
And that's what makes him so much more terrifying than a villain.
Yeah.
With, a convoluted backstory or a clear motive.
Right.
He's the boogeyman brought to life.
Yeah.
The embodiment of our primal fear of the unknown.
And it's a fear that Carpenter expertly manipulates throughout the film.
Yes.
He understood the power of suggestion, of letting the audience's imagination fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Much like Alfred Hitchcock did in his classic thrillers.
Absolutely. And speaking of Hitchcock,
Yeah.
there are definitely some parallels I see between Halloween and Psycho.
Yes.
The use of suspense over gore, the strategic placement of the camera, the way that everyday locations are transformed into places of terror.
One scene that really exemplifies this for me is when Laurie is walking home and we see Michael Myers lurking in the background, almost blending into the scenery.
Yes.
The camera lingers, the tension builds, and we, the audience, are left to anticipate the horror that might unfold.
Oh, yeah. Carpenter understood that what you don't see can be far more terrifying than anything explicitly shown on screen. And he masterfully uses sound to amplify that sense of dread.
Oh, for sure. And that simple, repetitive piano melody in the score has become so iconic.
It's so effective.
It's minimalistic, but incredibly effective.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because it's the use of high dissonant piano notes,
Uh-huh.
which studies have shown trigger a primal fear response in the human brain.
Wow.
It creates an unsettling feeling, almost like nails on a chalkboard, that gets under your skin and stays with you long after the film is over.
So it's not just a catchy tune. It's tapping into our biology.
Yes.
To evoke fear on a subconscious level.
Exactly. A brilliant example of how Carpenter combined technical filmmaking skill with an understanding of psychology to create a truly visceral experience for the audience.
Now, on the other side of that terror, we have Laurie Strode,
Right.
played by Jamie Lee Curtis in her film debut.
I know.
She's not your typical damsel in distress, is she?
No, not at all.
Right.
Laurie Strode is resourceful, quick thinking. And ultimately, she's the one who confronts Michael Myers head on.
Yeah.
She becomes the prototype for what we now call the final girl in horror films.
And for those not familiar with the final girl trope, it's typically the lone female character who survives the onslaught of the killer and often defeats them.
Right.
And it's a concept that has been both praised for its portrayal of female strength, but also criticized for potentially reinforcing certain gender stereotypes.
Look, it's a complex trope, no doubt.
Yeah.
But in the context of Halloween, Laurie Strode's character resonates because she represents the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable evil.
Yeah.
She fights back. She doesn't give up.
No.
And ultimately, she embodies hope in a world that suddenly seems very dark and dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you know, Halloween wasn't an instant critical darling.
Yeah.
In fact, it received kind of a mixed bag of reviews.
Right. I remember reading that some critics thought that it was exploitative, especially in its depiction of violence towards young women.
That was a very common critique at the time, yeah.
Yeah.
However, other critics, you know, recognized the film's artistic merit.
Yeah.
They praised its suspenseful buildup, its restraint in showing graphic violence, and its clever use of camera work and editing.
It's fascinating how, perspectives on art can really evolve over time.
Oh, absolutely.
Nowadays, Halloween is widely considered a horror masterpiece,
Right.
influencing countless filmmakers and solidifying its place in cinematic history.
Absolutely. And one of the things that contributed to its enduring legacy, I think, is its thematic depth.
Yeah.
While on the surface it's a slasher film, Halloween touches upon some really interesting ideas about suburban anxieties, the loss of innocence, and the nature of evil itself.
Like, for instance, that whole sequence where Laurie and her friends are babysitting.
Right.
And they're completely oblivious to the danger lurking right outside.
Yes.
It's like Carpenter's playing on our fear of the familiar becoming unfamiliar.
Yeah.
The safe space being violated.
Exactly. The suburbs, which are typically associated with security and comfort, are transformed into a place of fear and uncertainty.
Right.
It's a subversion of the American dream,
Mm-hmm.
a reminder that darkness can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic communities.
And then there's that lingering question about Michael Myers' true nature.
Right.
Is he just a deeply disturbed human being?
Yeah.
Or is there something more sinister at play?
Mm-hmm.
The film leaves it deliberately ambiguous.
Right. There are those subtle hints that he might possess some kind of supernatural ability.
Right.
He survives multiple gunshots, disappears into the night.
Right.
It's as if he's more than just a man in a mask. You know, he's like a force of nature, an embodiment of evil that can't be easily explained or defeated.
And that ambiguous ending with Michael Myers vanishing into the darkness,
Right.
it just adds another layer of unease to the whole film.
Yes, it does.
The threat isn't neatly resolved,
Yeah. Right.
It's just out there waiting to resurface.
Precisely, it leaves the audience with that lingering sense of dread and the unsettling feeling that evil can't be contained or controlled.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that we create in our own minds.
And speaking of creating monsters,
Yeah.
Halloween spawned an entire franchise of sequels, reboots, and reimaginings.
You did.
It's incredible how this one low-budget film had such a massive impact on horror cinema and pop culture as a whole.
It really speaks to the power of a simple yet effective story, you know?
Yeah.
Strong characters and a truly iconic villain.
Right.
I mean, Michael Myers became instantly recognizable, a symbol of pure, relentless evil.
But beyond the scares and the slasher tropes, I think what makes Halloween truly stand out is its ability to tap into universal fears and anxieties.
Yes.
That sense of vulnerability, the fear of the unknown, the potential for violence lurking in seemingly ordinary places.
Right.
Those are themes that resonate with audiences across generations.
Absolutely. And it's that timeless quality, that ability to speak to our deepest fears,
Yeah.
that has cemented Halloween's place as a horror classic.
It's really amazing, as we've been discussing Halloween, I'm struck by how much it achieves with so little.
Right.
You've got this minimalist score, simple setting.
Yeah.
Even Michael Myers himself is like a study in blankness.
That's the brilliance of Carpenter's vision, you know?
Yeah.
He understood that sometimes less is more. By stripping away all the excess, you know?
Oh, yeah.
He focuses our attention on what really matters.
Yeah.
Atmosphere, suggestion, and that raw power of primal fear.
It's like he's saying, I'm going to give you just the bare bones, the
Yeah.
essential elements of fear, and let your imagination just do the rest.
Exactly. And that's why I think it still resonates with audiences today. It doesn't rely on cheap jump scares or excessive gore. It taps into a much deeper,
Yeah.
more psychological level of horror.
Yeah.
The kind that lingers long after the credits have rolled.
I think that's what makes it such a rewarding film to revisit.
Oh, yeah.
Each time you watch it, you pick up on these new details, new layers of meaning.
Absolutely. For example, there's a lot of interesting discussion around the film's portrayal of teenage sexuality. Some argue that it punishes certain characters for their behavior,
Right.
while others see it as more of a commentary on the anxieties and the dangers that young women face.
Yeah. It's definitely a film that sparks debate
Yes.
and encourages viewers to think critically about the themes and messages that it presents.
Right.
But ultimately, I think Halloween succeeds because it understands the power of storytelling.
Yes. It goes beyond just being a horror film. It's a story about vulnerability, loss of innocence, and the fragility of safety.
Right.
Themes that are universally relatable and timeless.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Halloween, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners?
The key takeaway.
Yeah.
Well, I think Halloween reminds us that line between safety and danger can be very, very thin. That even in the most familiar settings, darkness can intrude and evil can lurk in unexpected places.
Yeah.
It challenges us, I think, to confront our own fears and anxieties.
Right.
And to acknowledge the potential for darkness that exists within ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought.
It is.
But also a very powerful one.
Yeah.
It reminds us to be aware, to be vigilant, and to never underestimate the power of fear.
And perhaps most importantly, Halloween encourages us to examine the ways in which we create our own monsters, both literally and figuratively.
Right.
The film is a reminder that the most terrifying things are often the ones that we can't see or understand.
Well said. I mean, it seems that Halloween is more than just a scary movie.
Oh, for sure.
It's a cultural touchstone.
It is.
A cinematic masterpiece and a reflection of our deepest fears and anxieties.
And it's a film that continues to inspire, terrify, and provoke conversation,
Yeah.
Almost 50 years after its release.
So to our listeners, if you haven't seen Halloween recently, or maybe you're brave enough to watch it for the first time, I encourage you to do so.
Yes.
Pay attention to the details, the atmosphere, the music,
right,
and the way that Carpenter masterfully builds that suspense.
Yes.
You might be surprised at what you discover.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to see the world around you a little differently, with a heightened awareness of the shadows and the things that might be lurking within them.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge and ideas.
Yes.
And remember, sometimes the most terrifying discoveries are the ones we make about ourselves.
Well said.